listen, okay? I promise that I will pay my taxes, okay? I just am a little bit busy right now. Oh my god. Listen, I'll have to call you back later, okay? But I promise I'll pay my taxes, okay? I promise, okay? um, 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 Canceled movies? Yeah, I know they're a little bit basic for video topics, but I kind of just do want to talk about them because it does seem very interesting that, like, you want to pour your heart and soul into a movie and then you realize that it's no longer happening. So, that's kind of sad for you. That's kind of sad. Really. It's kind of sad. Anyway, so for today, yeah, let's just talk about some canceled movies because why not? So, yeah, let's talk about them. The first movie that I wanted to talk about was Gigantic, a film based on Jack and the Beanstalk that was made at Walt Disney Animation Studios. This movie was supposed to be directed by Nathan Greno, the guy that gave us Tangled, and Meg Lefroy, the person that wrote Inside Out, and was supposed to be co-written by Meg Lefroy. And it would have been a musical with Robert and Kristen Anderson Lopez, the same people that also did the Frozen songs. However, the production wasn't the best since there were many delays through the project, with many release dates set like November 23rd, 2016, March 9th, 2018, November 21st, 2018, and November 25th, 2020. And it was even mentioned at the 2015 D23 Expo. However, on October 10th, 2017, Walt Disney Animation Studios president Ed Catmull announced that the film was ending active development, saying that no matter how much interesting of a project, it wasn't really doing good. And its November 2020 date was given to Raya and the Last Dragon until that film was moved to 2021. That's the whole thing. The next project is another Disney movie, Newt. Technically a Pixar production, but still worth mentioning. This movie would have been about two balloon-footed mutes, one male and one female, and they have to, get together to save their species. Yes, this sounds similar to Rio, and yes, give me like a second or two. The film was supposed to be released either in 2011 or 2012, but then it was moved back a bit, and then the movie was cancelled by early 2010. And then later on in March 2014, the president of Pixar, Ed Catmull, stated that the idea was just not working in pre-production, and I guess also Rio could have affected it too, but yeah. And then when the project was passed on to one of their directors, Pete Docter, he said he liked it, but then he also pitched him the idea of Inside Out, where, yeah, that one was really interesting, so they threw away Newt and focused on Inside Out. Next is DreamWorks' most infamous movies, Me and My Shadow. In 2010, DreamWorks Animation announced that they would make a project titled Me and My Shadow with a release date of March 2013. And it would have been about a shadow called Stan, who's like a shadow to some guy named Stanley, and they wanted to do more stuff, something, yada yada yada. The film was supposed to be directed by Mark Dindal, the guy that gave us The Emperor's New Groove, and Chicken Little, and the Garfield movie. Yeah, and then some infamous cast members would be joining the project, like Bill Hader, Kate Hudson, and Josh Gad. However, Mark Dindal did have to leave, and Alessandro Carloni replaced him, and the release was pushed back to November of 2013. However, it was moved again to March 14th, 2014, because Mr. Peabody and Sherman needed more time and needed to take its November 2013 release. In the beginning of 2013, Me and My Shadow went back into development after Mr. Peabody and Sherman again needed more time for it, and then it got its March 2014. However, I think it was around this time where it's like, oh, we have nothing to show because, you know, it's not really in the works right now. And then in 2015, Edgar Wright was signed on to direct a movie for DreamWorks, which he said was a story on a new take on a previously developed concept about shadows. But then in 2017, it was explained that Wright and David Williams have written 3 drafts, but it never quite went anywhere, so, that's kind of bad. Another DreamWorks movie that I want to mention is Spooky Jack, which, fun fact, this was supposed to be a collaboration with Jason Blum and his company, Blumhouse Productions. Yes, Blumhouse would have made an animated movie. So, in 2017, it was announced that an original feature called Spooky Jack, with a release date of September 17th, 2021, was in the works, with Blum being an executive producer. And the film would have been about 3 siblings that moved into a eerie new house that they discover that all the creatures that do not exist actually exist. Yeah, and there are concept art that made its way through the internet. However, in October of 2019, the film was removed off of DreamWorks' schedule, and then it was replaced by The Bad Guys, but then that movie had to be moved to April of 2022, so, and we kind of don't really know what happened to it afterwards. It could still be in the works, but I don't know, it's been since 2019, and it's 2025, so maybe not in the works anymore. Next is another movie that was made at Disney. My Peoples, or there's a lot of titles, just give me a minute. A few months after making Mulan, the director, Barry Cook, began to develop a pitch around a short story that was previously called The Ghost and the Gift. Around 3 children making something ghost, something, yada yada yada. In 2000, Barry Cook pitched his idea to Disney CEO at the time, Michael Eisner, and animation something I forgot, Thomas Schumacher, who both of them did agree to the idea, and it did show potential. However, Michael Eisner did just say that the project was too human. And they said that it could have been worked at the live action movie. I don't know what I'm saying anymore. But then for his next pitch meeting, he made some models of the cast, and he did say that it could be animated. Then he was given the go-ahead, and the movie would be animated at the Florida animation studio that Walt Disney Feature Animation did have to do. And it was going along pretty fine until 2003 in November, when someone got a company email saying that the film has been canceled. And yeah, some people did believe that the project was canceled due to Chicken Little, but it was mainly because of their animated movies at the time was not really doing so well, like Atlantis: The Lost Empire, Treasure Planet, and Brother Bear, so, it probably wouldn't have made any money at all, And the project's cancellation did also had to cause the Florida animation studio, Walt Disney Feature Animation, to close, leaving 260 artists losing their jobs. So that's kind of sad. Next is a film called Spore. Now you may be wondering, what the fuck is a Spore? This is actually a video game made by EA. And then in 2009, it was announced that EA, 20th Century Fox, and a company called AIG announced that the film would be happening. And then the film would be animated by Blue Sky Studios, and it would be directed by Chris Wedge. However, it was in development hell throughout Blue Sky's 2010 stuff. And then after the Disney buyout of Fox, it was announced that the film wasn't happening anymore, especially because that Blue Sky Studios would be shutting down in February of 2021. So that's sad again. Next is the Smurfs movie that was supposed to be made by Paramount and Nickelodeon Movies before the 2025 version. Let me explain. In July of 2005, it was announced that a trilogy of films would be in the production by Paramount and Nickelodeon Movies. And the first movie would have been released in 2008, around the time as the Smurfs' 50th anniversary. In 2007, IMDb was listed at the site that it would have been released in theaters on November 28th, 2008, aka being like 3 weeks after another Paramount film they were distributing, Madagascar 2. But yeah, and the movie would have been like a mix between like The Princess Bride, Shrek, and The Lord of the Rings, which was pretty interesting. In February of 2008, some animation footage was kind of leaked with during the Happy Smurf Day Euro Tour that showed like 10 seconds of the movie itself. And then during the first quarter of 2008, Paramount released the official website, smurfsthemovie.net or something, I don't know. And in April 2008, there was a trailer and a TV spot that was during production. And then the trailer was originally like around 2 minutes and 15 seconds long, and the TV spot would have been like 35 seconds long. Unfortunately, however, in June of 2008, the movie was around 60 to 80% complete, and there was a trailer supposed to be ready with the release of Kung Fu Panda. However, the producers met with Sony Pictures, and they would eventually make the rights go to Sony instead of Paramount. And that's how we got the live-action movies, instead of the one that we were supposed to get, so that's really sad. Yeah. Unfortunately, however, we would get a Smurfs movie by Paramount, and it's called Smurfs, the movie that we hate so much. Why does this happen? Next is a movie called Foster that was supposed to be in the works by Blue Sky Studios, and it was announced in 2018. And the plot would have been about a teenager after being disappointed that his favorite book saga was ending. He did try to talk to the author, but somehow managed to get involved in an adventure in one of his books. And yeah, that's basically all we knew about the plot. However, the people behind it were pretty interesting. Tim Faradelli was making the script, Mark Platt was producing the movie, Karen Fisher and Steve Martino were to direct the movie, and the songwriters of La La Land and The Greatest Showman would have been making this a musical, where, yeah, that would have been really interesting to see. Unfortunately, due to the buyout of Fox and the closure of Blue Sky Studios in 2021, we couldn't see this movie anymore. Yay. And it's a shame, because this movie actually seemed like to have a bunch of potential, really. And there are even some animation tests out there if you look hard enough. Next is one of the unfortunate victims of Warner Brothers Discovery's merger, that being Scoob: Holiday Hunt. In June of 2024, it was announced that Tony Corvoway, the director of Scoob, was announced that it would be a prequel of The Thing. In December of 2021, HBO Max released a sizzle reel featuring the first look of the Christmas-themed prequel film titled Scoob: Holiday Hunt, which was originally supposed to release on the service in December of 2022. And the movie would have been about Scooby-Doo's first Christmas. However, it does leave the dog and the kids to show I don't know what I'm saying anymore. However, in August of 2022, of course, Warner Brothers Discovery decided to cancel it. Apparently, the guy decided to finish it, even if it's no longer getting released, so yeah, it's kind of weird. However, maybe it might get saved, who knows, since 2 Looney Tunes projects have been saved before, like The Day the Earth Blew Up and Coyote vs. Acme. So, who knows, maybe this movie could get saved too. Next is Cats. No, not the weird live-action one. I'm talking about the one that was made by Steven Spielberg's old animation company, Amblination. In the 1990s, Steven Spielberg got the rights to the adaptation of the musical Cats, which was based on a book, Old Possum's Book of Practical Cats. And it would have followed the stage show pretty closely while also adding a new song. Even Steven Spielberg was even set to direct it. And it would have been set for a release of 1997. Unfortunately, due to the box office failure of Balto, another Amblination movie, the studio shut down. Yeah. And although there probably would have been attempts to move the project to Steven Spielberg's new company, DreamWorks, those plans never happened. So, at least we got the one where, it looks like a fucking abomination. Next is a remake of the 1968 animated film The Beatles' Yellow Submarine. In 2009, at the D23 Expo, it was announced that Robert Zemeckis' company, Image Movers Digital, was making a remake of the film that I mentioned, and that it would have been released around the same time as the 2012 Summer Olympics. However, due to the box office flop that was Disney's A Christmas Carol in 2009, and also because their next movie, Marnie's Mom, was looking for a not great box office run, Disney decided to shut down Image Movers Digital in early 2011. Although progress on the film was going on at the time, apparently they just didn't want to do another one of these. And yeah, there are leaked footage of this movie, which looks like an abomination. This one just would have been existing, I guess. I don't know. Our recent movie that got cancelled is Toto. Yes, that Toto. The dog from The Wizard of Oz. In July 2018, Warner Animation Group announced that they were going to produce an animated film based on the book Toto, the Dog Gone Amazing Journey of the Wizard of Oz. In 2021, it was confirmed that Animal Logic would be the animation studio, and that Alex Timbers would be directing the movie. And the movie would have been released on February 2nd, 2024. However, in April of 2023, that release was taken off the schedule, and that release date was given to the Alto Knights until that movie was moved to 2025. And then in June of 2025, we suddenly heard that from an animator that the movie was never happening. And the animator stated that a few years ago, I worked on a project that was tremendous fun. A lot of talented artists were involved. I was one of those where you throw hundreds of designs into the pot and everything is great, but nothing is ever followed up. Then it suddenly stopped. The people you were talking to on a weekly basis were never heard from again. Recently, many years later, I heard that the project was dead. Many of us have been there, and for me, this isn't the only one. And then someone else, a character designer, stated that they worked on this project along some amazing designers at Animal Logic. After this, we were on this roller coaster of a dream for about 2 years until the project was put on hold. We were always in awe of what you wonderful artists did for the production. It's a real shame the project never got to see the light of day. So basically, I guess when Animal Logic was bought out by Netflix, I guess Warner Brothers were too hesitant about a movie that was animated at Netflix doing that, I guess. I don't know. And it was stated that the movie was still stuck in pre-production, so we never actually saw some real animation being worked on the movie, which is kind of sad. Our final animated movie that I'm talking about in this video is Big Bugman. This movie was in the works for a while. It was supposed to be a hand-drawn movie. However, most of this thing is about one of the voice actors, Marlon Brando, that voiced the lady Mrs. Sour. And the movie would have been released around 2006 to 2008. However, there was one small problem. Marlon Brando died in 2004. Although he did voice all of his lines, I guess the people behind it didn't think that it would fit right to be his final movie, I guess, so I guess it just never happened. So, yeah. Anyway, time to move on to live action. I'm tired of animated movies now. Our first live action picture is Batgirl, a movie based off the DC Comics character Batgirl. This one was pretty interesting because this movie was nearly completed, starring Leslie Grace as Batgirl, J.K. Simmons as Commissioner Gordon, Michael Keaton as Batman, aka the film would take place after the events of The Flash, and Brendan Fraser being the villain of the movie Firefly. There were many attempts to get Batgirl in the DCEU at the time, like being part of the Birds of Prey before Harley Quinn stepped in. And then in 2018, the writer of Birds of Prey was given the thing to write a Batgirl movie. And then in December 2020, Batgirl was listed to be a HBO Max exclusive movie. And then in April of 2021, it was announced to be on DC's slate of films that would be released either around 2022 or 2023. And then the film went on. It went through pre-production just fine. It filmed all of its scenes, and it was in the middle of post-production. However, in August of 2022, like Scoob Holiday Hunt, this movie was canceled. Yay! And the budget was $70 to $90 million, which was pretty low, but Warner Brothers didn't want to spend it for Batgirl. It was a tax write-off, god damn it. So it's kind of sad, especially since the movie was pretty much almost done. But who knows, maybe she might have a chance in the new universe. Next was the first attempt of Dune. In 1971, a production company, APJAC, I don't know if I say that right, was given the rights to the film, alongside some other projects, I guess, but it's a long story. Maybe this topic might get its own video one day, but in summary, they originally wanted to shoot the film in 1974, but I guess one of the main people that was supposed to work on the movie died in 1973. The person that was supposed to direct it was Alejandro Jodorowsky. I don't know if I said that right. And apparently, his script was supposed to be 14 hours long, which was the size of a phone book, someone later recalled. And then after a while, it just kept going on and on and on and on. Again, this project probably could be worked on its own video, or someone else probably has a video about that. But I guess in the late 1970s, the project never happened because, I don't know, maybe just no one wanted to work on the movie, I guess. And then a draft of the screenplay for one of the things was found somewhere, I guess. I don't know, man. This is like a long story. Maybe I might go into it later. Our next movie is Justice League Immortal, which was supposed to be the first time that all of the Justice League members was supposed to be together. And it was actually supposed to set up like a, cinematic universe before Marvel did it. So I guess in 2007, Warner Brothers decided to make a movie about the Justice League, And then they decided to bring on board George Miller, which at the time he finished Happy Feet and was waiting for Mad Max Fury Road. But then, due to the writers' strike of 2008, I guess the movie was canceled. And I guess after the success of The Dark Knight, Warner Brothers realized, hey, why don't we just focus on completing Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy instead of working on a Justice League movie? So, yeah, that's kind of sad, I guess. But then again, we did get The Dark Knight Rises instead of a Justice League movie directed by George Miller. I don't know what I'm saying anymore. Next is a movie called Midnight Rider, the Greg Allman story, which was supposed to be a biopic by Greg Allman. And it would have starred people like William Hurt, Zoe Stush, Wyatt Russell, Bradley Whitford, and Joel David Moore. In May of 2013, it was announced that Open Road Films, Randall Miller, and Jody Savin was planning to make a biopic about Greg Allman. And then in November of 2013, it was announced that the title of the film would be Midnight Rider, the Greg Allman story. And production was supposed to begin on February 24th, 2014. Unfortunately, however, on February 20th, 2014, apparently some of the crew wanted to do a camera test, featuring a scene where Greg Allman was on a hospital bed and looking on the bridge to see his brother, I guess. And they decided to shoot at a real location where, trains would be coming by. And they did get 2 scenes in. But before they got the third take, however, someone yelled that there was a train coming. Everyone rushed to get off the train. However, they just so happened to bring a hospital stretcher bed, or whatever you want to call them. Then the train came by. Multiple people got injured. But, for one, it caused death. The metal bed shattered, leaving multiple fragments of the thing, and they struck a camera assistant called Sarah Jones, which, unfortunately, she couldn't get off the bridge in time, and she was hit by the fast-moving train, killing her on the spot. Although most of the crew got some fractures, and for one, a bone, something, I don't know, seeing one of the crew die in front of your things was really sad. And although there were plans to continue filming in June of 2014, in April of 2014, the people behind the movie went to court for involuntary manslaughter and criminal trespass. And yeah, it's a long story for all of those things, but moral of the story, some people were served for prison and some people did not, and the movie never happened. And yeah, seeing just someone die is just unfortunate, Next is a sequel to Mrs. Doubtfire. In 2001, Bonnie Hunt wanted to make a sequel to Mrs. Doubtfire and did write the things, I guess. And then she did a rewrite in 2006 because Robin Williams was unhappy with the script and wanted to change it. And then the film was supposed to be released in late 2007, but due to script problems, the film was scrapped in December of 2006. And then in 2014, Christopher Columbus, the original director of the movie, I guess, stated that they were talking about a sequel to Mrs. Doubtfire with Robin Williams. And then in April of 2014, a sequel was announced to be in development at 20th Century Fox with Robin Williams and Christopher Columbus to return to make the movie. Although people weren't really thinking that this movie was going to be good, aka the reception would be kind of mixed since since things have changed from the 90s, with the LGBTQ community, and that would be kind of hard to do it, I guess. And although there were quite some people interested to return, like Matthew Lawrence, Lisa Jacob, and Pierce Brosnan, Mara Wilson, one of the kids in the movie, she had no real interest in returning to the sequel. Unfortunately, however, in August 2014, Robin Williams died. And sometime after Williams' death, it was revealed that Robin Williams was not really wanting to work on film sets since it would take him away from his family for extended periods of time. And he just wanted to sign on the Mrs. Doubtfire sequel purely out of necessity. And then a year later, in August of 2015, Christopher Columbus revealed that the sequel came to be after someone came up with a very interesting idea. And he had a conversation with Robin Williams about the subject, which was the last time he ever talked to him. And then, I guess after Disney bought out Fox in 2019, the sequel just vanished. And then in December of 2021, Christopher Columbus stated that the sequel would just be impossible to work on without Robin Williams. And then in November of 2023, Christopher Columbus stated that he would hate if Disney made their own version of Mrs. Doubtfire without Robin Williams, which would just be sad, I guess. Yeah. Okay, I think that's a little bit sad for now, so let's do something more lighter, like The Adventures of Thomas. In 2009, Hit, Thomas's owner, I think at the time, was making a live-action adaptation of Thomas that was supposed to be in World War II. Yep. And it was originally supposed to get a late 2010 release, but it was moved to spring of 2011. And then in January of 2011, the release date was pushed back to 2012. And then a draft of the script was made by Josh Klausner, the guy that did Shrek 3rd and Shrek Forever After. Yeah. And then in June of 2011, it was announced that Nine director Shane Ackner would be directing the movie, with Weta Digital being the visual effects company. However, in 2012, Mattel bought the rights of all the things Hit owned, even including Thomas the Tank Engine. And one of the first things they did was cancel the movie altogether. Yep. No more The Adventures of Thomas, no more movie. And then there is another attempt in 2020, but for this particular movie, it just never happened. Mattel removed it from the face of existence. Next was Aziz Ansari's first attempt of making a movie, being Immortal. In February of 2022, Searchlight Pictures announced a development of an untitled movie, being written and directed and produced by Aziz Ansari to be his first directorial debut, with Aziz Ansari and Bill Murray to be the stars of the movie. And then principal photography began in March of 2022. Unfortunately, a month later, Searchlight Pictures halted production on April 18th and suspended production on April 20th due to having some investigations about Bill Murray's inappropriate behavior. And then in April 30th of 2022, Bill Murray made a statement. I did something that I thought was funny, and it wasn't taken that way. The company, the movie studio, wanted to do the right thing, so they wanted to check it all out, investigate it, so they stopped the production. But as of now, we're talking and we're trying to make peace with each other. And then in October of that year, reports emerged that Bill Murray sexually, allegedly strangled a much younger female. What the fuck? And then, I guess, since the movie was put on hold, Aziz Ansari was like, oh well, I'm gonna make another movie. And that's how we got Good Fortune, which is about to release in a month or so. And then in 2025, Aziz Ansari revealed that 75% of the film was shot before, all of that, I guess. So, yeah. And I don't know, I don't even know if this movie's gonna even happen, but I don't know, it could, if Bill Murray can get his shit together. Next is a canceled Netflix movie, The Mothership. In February of 2021, it was announced that Netflix would be making a movie called The Mothership, with Halle Berry to be the star and be the executive producer of the film. And Matthew Carman would be a director of the movie. And then principal photography began in June of 2021 and then ended in August of 2021. However, unfortunately, in January of 2024, Netflix announced that they would no longer release the film, mainly because of the lengthy post-production, and that it was just never completed. And then another person also said that the child actors of the movie grew up between the roles, and I guess if they wanted to do rewrites, they wanted to make more child actors, I guess. I don't know what I'm saying anymore. And then in February 2nd of 2024, Netflix chief content creator at the time, Bella Bajara, stated that everybody just felt like it was not the right thing to do it. Yeah, so, that's sad. Next is a film called Golden, which I am sad that this never came out. In March of 2017, it was announced that 20th Century Fox would be making a musical titled Atlantis, which would be inspired by Virginia Beach's Atlantis Apartments. You'll make more sense later. Michael Mayer would be an executive producer, but then he was later to be the director of the film, with Martin Hayes to be the screenplay, and then with some people like Pharrell Williams, Mimi Velez, and Gil Netter to be the producers. And it was basically in development hell for a while until March 2024 when Michael Gonery replaced Mayer to be the director, and then the movie was moved to Universal Pictures. And then they got their cast with Kelvin Harrison Jr., Divine Joy Randolph, Halle Berry, Brian Tyree Henry, and Missy Elliott. And then they filmed the movie around Virginia Beach in June of 2024, and then it ended later that year. And in August of 2024, it was announced that Atlantis would be the title, but then in November of 2024, the film had been retitled to Golden. And the film was originally set for release on May 9th, 2025. Unfortunately, however, in February of 2025, a few months before the movie was supposed to be released, the movie was canceled after spending $20 million on it. And more fun news, the studio had no plans to sell it to other studios for completion and distribution. And the reason for the cancellation was due to an anonymous agreement between the director and the producers, and they stated that the film just did not live up to their expectations. And I'm kind of sad for this one, because this was actually supposed to be a musical with the people that was behind The Greatest Showman and La La Land. This one would have been so good. God damn it! Why is life not fair? Next is the 8th Paranormal Activity movie. In 2022, it was announced that the 8th installment of the Paranormal Activity series would be in the works with Blumhouse and Paramount. However, Unfortunately, due to the negative reviews of Paranormal Activity, Next of Kin, the film was just straight up never made. Yeah, and that's it, I guess. Next is the sequel to Transformers The Last Knight, Transformers Rise of Unicron. That was the title that I was given, so yeah. Before The Last Knight was released, Paramount was already thinking of a cinematic universe of Transformers. Yeah, they wanted to go the Marvel route. However, there was one problem. No one gave a damn shit about The Last Knight. And then after The Last Knight flopped at the box office and was not really given good reviews, Michael Bay got fired from Paramount Pictures and his universe was scrapped. However, although Transformers Rise of Unicron was cancelled, the other film, on the other hand, Bumblebee, was still in production at the time and it couldn't really been cancelled. So they reworked Bumblebee to be more of a reboot. And I don't know, I guess Paramount wanted to make that film part of it, but I don't know, I guess not. And I guess they did change it a little bit to be Rise of the Beast, I guess. Next was a Spider-Man movie that was supposed to be directed by James Cameron. During a talk with Next there was supposed to be a Spider-Man film to be directed by James Cameron. Sometime in the 1980s, Cameron and some Marvel people got together in a room to talk about everyone's favorite superhero, the X-Men. But then the topic switched into more Spider-Man. And he did write the script. The script's probably out there somewhere. However, there was one slight issue. Spider-Man's rights was owned by Canon, a cheap studio that did like Superman 4, I think. I don't know, I forgot which studio did it. Then, I guess they wanted to meet up with Cameron to do the movie, and then I guess it involved to like multiple studios saying that we own the rights to Spider-Man, even if they didn't. It was like a whole tangle of webs. And James Cameron, after working on True Lies, wanted 20th Century Fox to work on the movie, but 20th Century Fox said they didn't want to be in all of the things. And then after making Titanic, he tried again, and then it failed. And then I guess Spider-Man's rights went to Sony, and that's how we got it. So, yeah, sorry, Cameron. Next is another Spider-Man movie, The Amazing Spider-Man 3. Sony wanted to make The Amazing Spider-Man 2 to make its own cinematic universe, featuring The Amazing Spider-Man 3, which would have had a release date of June 10th, 2016. And then, I guess since they wanted to make this a cinematic universe, they decided to also do more projects about other characters like Venom, Black Cat, and Spider-Man 2099, I guess. Hold on, I gotta sneeze. Anyway, as I was saying, but then due to the unfortunate results of The Amazing Spider-Man 2, all those projects, I guess, were on hold. And I guess after following the 2014 Sony Pictures hack, they decided to just cancel all of it altogether, and they decided to work on the MCU with their own Spider-Man, I guess. Next is supposed to be a Godzilla King of the Monsters movie. No, not the 2019 film. I'm talking about one where it was supposed to be in 3D. Ooh. And there is a plot online where it was like a meteorite collides with the American defense satellite, which triggers a nuclear missile towards Earth. The missile detonates in the South Pacific. Something. I don't know how it was supposed to be in 3D. The conception was started in 1983 when filmmaker Steve Miner approached Toho, the owners of Godzilla, into doing a Hollywood-produced film of Godzilla. And then he did some writing sometime later on. There was some storyboards of the movie. There were some special effects. However, Steve realized that it was. Then the Steve decided to shop around to several studios until he ran out of studios. And then I guess he wanted to make a more budget friendly version, I guess. However, he realized that the thing would be like really, really expensive, with possibly having a $25 to $30 million budget. So I guess Toho stopped before production would start. And then I guess that the return of Godzilla put a big hole on the project, and yeah, I guess it never happened. Although it would be interesting to see Godzilla in the 80s with that kind of 3D thing where it's like, whoa, 3D, whoa! Next is Mouse Guard, which I guess was based off of like a card game, I guess. I don't know. In July of 2016, 20th Century Fox announced that the film would be in the works, with Matt Reeves as a producer and Gary Whitta as the screenwriter. And for the director, Wes Ball signed on to be the director after making his Maze Runner trilogy for Fox. In March of 2019, it was announced that Thomas Brody Stranger and Andy Serkis would be part of the cast, with Idris Elba being consideration as well. However, 1 month later, in April of 2019, Disney bought out Fox, which halted the production 2 weeks before production was supposed to begin, and then it was placed in a turnaround. If you know what that means, good, because I don't know what that means. And then the director, Wes Ball, later confirmed on Twitter or X or whatever you like to call it, that production was canceled. And at the time of its cancellation, the film spent around $20 million on pre-production, and it was expected to have an overall budget of $170 million. Reason being that Wes Ball really wanted to use the same technology as Avatar. Use a lot of the digital face scanning thing, I guess. And although he did work with that technology with Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, his first attempt did not happen. Then we have the sequels to Dragon Ball Evolution. Before the movie was released, there were some interviews by the cast saying that, yeah, we really want to do a sequel, so much so that we actually signed up for 2. And they wanted to do more stuff with the Dragon Ball franchise, mainly Dragon Ball Z, and probably having more characters like Gohan and Vegeta. And then, yeah, it would have been interesting to see how they would go. Unfortunately, however, Dragon Ball Evolution released to not really good reviews, and those other 2 movies were canceled. And maybe it might have had another chance if they took the reception of the first one and tried to make it better, but I don't know, I guess after doing that, they just gave up altogether. Our final movie that we're looking at today is a movie based off Napoleon, the French dude, that was supposed to be directed by Stanley Kubrick. After 2001, A Space Odyssey became a big success, I guess, Stanley Kubrick wanted to make a movie about the life of Napoleon. And then he drafted a screenplay in 1961, which would have been like a grandiose epic. And then I guess he wanted to make it like one of his biggest movies that he ever done, I guess. So much so that he wanted to have like a lot of extras, like being one of the big extra people, I guess. I don't know. And the film was into pre-production and was ready to begin filming in 1969. However, the studio that was behind it, MGM, decided to cancel it, mainly because that the budget was really, really high, and there was a change of ownership at MGM. And after the poor reception of the 1970 film Soviet about Napoleon, Waterloo, it was no more. And then after Stanley Kubrick's death, I guess, then Stanley Kubrick died in 1999, aka it would just never happen at all. However, in March of 2013, Steven Spielberg, which he did try to collaborate with him with AI, artificial intelligence, before he died, so Yeah. Anyway, in March of 2013, Steven Spielberg said that he wanted to turn his script into a TV miniseries about Napoleon. So, who knows, maybe that project could see the light of day.
And that's all the movies I have for today. Huh. Someone's at the door.
Mr. Relations, open the door. You're getting arrested for not doing your taxes.
Shit.
We will use force to open this door. You have 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hey Chief, you might want to bring him back up. This is a code 35. We got a runner. The location? The woods.